Are you wanting to publish your game on the Metastore? Do you want to publish an early access? Or do you at least want to know how to go from early access to full release? Do you want to know how to be ready for those publishing updates or submissions? Then you're in the right place. I'm going to share with you things that haven't been shared in YouTube at all. I haven't seen anyone talk about the VRCs like I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm going to share with you in detail what Meta looks for and why. We're going to start with the packaging. Packaging has two things that you have to worry about: the manifest file and your file size. With the manifest file, what you have to do is make sure that you have the right permissions. Meta wants to make sure that you're not installing things or asking for specific permissions that you are not using. So for example, reading images or storing data on the phone, on the Quest, that you're not using. So you need to give a reason why you're using certain data. So let's say you have a game, you're building it, you're not even thinking about the Metastore. So my first advice is get used to publishing to the Meta developer backend. I always stress, use this. Even if you're not publishing now, you need to get acquainted with this. If you're doing this, like I suggest you do, early on, you'll notice that when you upload a build to the MetaQuest, to the developer dashboard, you go here, hit upload, you'll see that I'll get a warning. Don't ignore the warnings because some of them will become important for your VRC checks. So I'm going to show you one right now. When I upload, this is almost like a default MetaQuest build, okay? I don't have much. I don't have new plugins, but if I click here, you'll see that I'm going to take a screenshot just in case. There's some important information in here about the manifest file. There's a lot of permissions in there that I don't use, and it's going to let me upload. In a little bit, you'll see that it's going to stop and it's going to upload. This is important because if you don't explain why you have these permissions, you will get flagged and it won't pass the VRC check. So you need to make sure that your manifest file contains information that's accurate and it's supported by the headset. If you have something in there that you are not sure of, you need to remove. Like if you are not using it, then you need to remove it. Why is it there in the first place? Why is it there in the first place? I'm going to show you. So what happens is, like, if you go back, let's say you get that warning and you're like, okay, where is it? You look at the Android manifest file and I don't see anything. What's happening is Unity compiles the game, and when it packages it, it checks folders to see what packages are needed for the permission. So it automatically adds to this file as it builds because it needs to compile and it needs to verify, okay, this needs write access, read access, and all these other things. And most of the time, it's because there's plugins or sample assets in your files that have these needs for permissions. And so Unity automatically adds them. So you either have to create a tool at runtime that takes them out, but there's something even easier here, a tool that's already given to you in here. And it's just one line of code per permission. So if I have a permission like read phone state, I can remove that. And what this will do, it will make sure that even after Unity puts it in, it will remove it. And so this is a nice prevention for anything that you know is going to get compiled after. So you don't even have to take out the asset that you downloaded by accident or because it came as a sample project. Just use this tool to remove anything you're not using. And if you see that there's like a behavior, play test the game after you remove the feature, because sometimes you need to read and write to your device to store, for example, player prefs or other files if you're doing DLC and whatnot. So make sure that your game still works after you remove the features. And if it doesn't work, add them back and explain to Meta why you're using those features. You can write notes on your upload, on your builds, as to why these things are being asked for. The other thing is the file size limit. If you looked at here is 1 gig. Actually, this 1 gig thing, we tested it because we got super close, and now I think we have to split them with MonkeyDo, is that the file limit is almost like 1.09 gigs. So if you have 1 gig, 0.09, I think it still passes by. The moment it goes to 1.1, that's over 1 gig to them, I think. That's the check. Because we were on the edge. And the moment we went 1.1 gigs, is when it didn't let us upload. But let's say you're over that by a law. It doesn't matter by how much. If you need to, in here you will split it. Right here, split application binary, and it'll split in an OBB file. And in here, I'll show you where to upload it. In the same place we went to upload to the meta dashboard, when you hit next, you will go down here and right here, expansion file, OBB. And in here, you will add that OBB file, and you don't have to worry about trying to traverse to find the OBB file. Meta will install it, and the APK will look for the OBB, and it'll be in the right place. That's it. So all you need to make sure is it's uploaded in here, and you'll be fine. What happens is if you don't have the OBB files installed, like let's say when you sideload it, if you sideload the APK but not the OBB file, what will happen is you'll just get a black screen because the APK file is super small. It doesn't have anything, and the OBB file is carrying most of the heavy weight. Okay. So that's that. That's how you'll know if the APK didn't work. Next, we'll go over the audio requirements. I want to do a plug for this because this can save you a lot of time. Okay. This is not for a VRC check. If you're using spatialization with the 3D audio, there's a change that's happened recently. Meta uploaded a new spatialization asset with their SDK. It's no longer the OVR spatialization tool. So if you're using the old one and you want to update, you need to make sure that you're using Unity 2022 at least, I think. But double check, because sometimes audio is like the last thing you think about. Don't wait till the end. Double check what you need to do if that's what you want. If you want the latest Meta SDK, download it. Make sure it's the latest version and that you're in the right Unity editor. So that way, if you want spatial audio, that you have it. Okay, but you have to do this ahead of time because it'll mess you up. Okay, we're going to talk about performance. This one's another big one, especially if you're going from early access to publishing to the store, full release. This refresh rate. It used to be back in the day when it was Quest 1 and Quest 2, I remember we were worried about hitting 72 frames per second because we had a lot of things in our game, and we have a mirror that reflects you, and the mirror was so nice, but it dropped frames constantly, and so we had to figure out how to maintain the refresh rate. And one of the things we thought we could do is that we forced the max refresh rate per headset. So if you had a Quest 2, you could max it to 90, and we thought that could bypass that because then when it drops, it would only drop to like 72 or 74 frames per second. So maybe with the refresh rate being better in performance and whatnot, we thought that would be enough. But when we went to the full meta release, they explained to us what it was that was the requirement. What they want, which is literally what it says in there, but it's not apparent to people, is the specified refresh rate. And that specification is made by the developer. When you set the refresh rate to 90, that's the standard that you have to make sure the game stays with. So you set the bar when you set the max on a headset on the game. So you got to make sure that if you're setting the refresh rate to 90 or 120 or whatever it is, you need to make sure that it doesn't stay below that. And what I mean by below that, I mean consistently, like if it's a 72 and it drops to 60 and it stays at 60, that's bad. That's not going to pass a VRC check. Meta knows that it might drop performance when it's loading a new scene or different things that are happening. So they are okay with dips, but they want to make sure that the average and the constant frame rate is in par with what you set it to be. So 72 stays at 72, 90 stays at 90. And so here's the difference. Early access, when you first submit, they'll check with the analytics tool. I'll show you. So they usually technically automate it with this. So for example, this game right now is at 72 for the most part, and sometimes it drops on the Quest to 70, which we gotta fix. But this is enough for early access to be okay. If the average was at 60, then we would get a red flag, and Meta would, even after we submitted, if we got approved, this will constantly run. And if there's ever a dip that's consistent, like if it's constantly at 60, Meta will give us a warning email saying that if we don't fix that, and they'll take you out of the store. And it's the same with the Meta release, full release. If you release to the Meta store a full release game, then you need to make sure ahead of time that is consistent, because they're going to check in the game. So what happens is when you release a full game, they'll actually go in there and play the game. And they'll go with the OVR metrics tool and make sure they give you when it drops to red and when it hits performance problems. And then what happens is the reason they do that is first they want to make sure performance accurate, and then they do another check after that without the OVR metrics tool to make sure that the experience is smooth. That's the main thing, is they want a smooth experience in their apps on the Meta Store. And so they don't want, like, if let's say you're running around and all of a sudden the frames drop to 60 and they stay at 60, then you're going to be constantly lagging. The game is trying to catch up, and that's bad. And so they don't want that. And so if they play your game and they see that, they're not going to accept it for a full release. So this is one of those big metrics with optimization that you have to make sure you hit for full release. And even after, let's say you do get it there and then you publish to the Meta Store, they'll still do this check where this automation is always there, that if you drop frames for a long time and people are constantly at lower frame rates, they're going to give you a warning and that they're going to take it down. How long you have, I'm not sure. But I want to make sure that you understand that's how they measure that, and that's why they measure it that way. It seems intuitive when I tell you, but now you know exactly what they're looking for and how they're testing it. Pause menu is another big one, especially in VR, because you have a single player and you have a multiplayer. If you have a single player game, they want to make sure that when you pause the game, you have to freeze the game. Everything has to pause. And ideally, they don't want your game hands in there because they have their own renders. And so they don't want your hands rendering on as well as theirs. And if you are in multiplayer game, the app has to continually run in the background because obviously it's a multiplayer game. And the same thing with the hands. But the problem is that a lot of times when in-app purchases and other things, in order to implement this, the best way to do it is not just check for the button press, is check for on application pause and on application focus. Because those two things happen a lot with a VR headset. When they take it off, when they walk away from the boundaries. So make sure you're very well acquainted with application pause and application lose focus. And make sure that in the editor, you comment those out or you only do it when it's on the builds. Because in the editor, if you click away, that's a loose on focus. So that will get you stuck a lot if you are testing in the editor with VR. The entitlement check is one that I did a video on this. You can look for it. Pretty straightforward. They have some with a grip. These are pluses. I won't get too much into this, but Meta is trying to set a standard. I know sometimes it's easier to just use the trigger because people smash grab stuff, but they rather you use the grip for grabbing and the trigger for other things. And if you have any questions about some of these that maybe I glanced over that you want to dive deeper into, I can talk about it. I know for multiplayer games, there's also more moderation. For example, reporting tools. You have to make sure you use a reporting tool if you're doing a multiplayer game. This one is one that I want to cover. The main thing I want to cover is things that I didn't know that I wish I knew before. And that's what I'm trying to help you guys avoid some, because some of these are very costly at the end and it's easier to avoid and easier to prepare for if you know ahead of time. So with logos and publicity and assets, one of the biggest things is that Meta wants everything to be for Meta, right? If you have a Steam release, PSVR, whatever else, Pico, sometimes you like have multiple arts for everything, like you're releasing to all the stores, and so you just list all of them, and maybe even in your trailer you have coming soon to Meta, PSVR, Steam, whatever, and you shoot one video to cover all the bases. But Meta doesn't want it doesn't want another headset in their trailer. They want trailers specifically for Meta with their headset. So if you're gonna do mixed reality or any kind of green screen recordings for your trailer, they need to be Meta specific, and this happens a lot. So I can show you. I have a Quest 3 and maybe like I have a sticker, right? On here. Like if I have a sticker covering this right here or something else, what will happen is if it's in the trailer, they'll flag it. So they flagged us for stickers on our headsets. They also flagged us for this not being used. So if you're shooting a trailer, make sure whoever is doing it, using it, has the wristbands. In early access, they might not even look at the trailer, but for full release, they will. They look at all these trailers and every like second 21, that looks like a different headset, and it wasn't. It was just there was a sticker on the Quest 2. And so if you have stickers and stuff, make sure you're shooting footage with original headset that doesn't look modified, and make sure it's a meta trailer. Anything PC, Steam, take it out or just leave it out of the renders and make sure it's all for meta. They just want you to do meta specific trailer. If you go to Steam, I don't think Steam cares that much that you use, because you usually use link cables, so they have a lot of headsets, so they understand that. So you could do the same trailer you shot for the Quest, but then you can add the logos for Steam and whatnot. And I don't think they flag you for I mean, they might do something similar, but it's not as like crazy as the meta one. And so I want to make sure that when you shoot your trailer that you understand those things, so that in case if you spray painted your headset blue or red or whatever, or you have like a cover that's a different color, that might get flagged too. So I just want to make sure that you take all the protective gear or the extra gear that you don't need and just shoot as if you're shooting trailer for the Meta Quest. Okay, and that will save you a lot of time. Same with the images, they're gonna check that. Also, if you put an Oculus in the name instead of Meta, that's a huge thing. And also now that they changed to Meta Horizon, that might be another thing. They're very strict about the naming, even though some of their stuff still outdated says Oculus. Yeah, it's weird, but yeah, they're big on that. So if you have, like, for example, on the buttons when you log in, we used to have Oculus login as a button, and they're like, no, it has to say Meta login. So just check your game, all the text, make sure there's no Oculus on it. They don't dive deep into the scripts, but any UI that pops up, if they catch you with the wrong naming, they will have you fix it, especially for release. Early access, they're not as strict, okay? Because they're not going to look at your game deep in. In early access, mostly it's policy VRCs and some automation with the tools that they have. Accessibility, the main thing with accessibility is that they want, if someone is colorblind, they want to make sure that you're able to do that if possible. The room scales. Oftentimes, what I've seen other devs do, and I don't know if you do, but they check all the boxes. Like, let's say I make a game that's just for standing. It's like, oh, well, you can move around. So that's room scale as well. So I'll check for that, trying to grab a bigger audience, right? And then maybe I'll say, well, you could technically play my game sitting. It's not the best, but, and so then you check it because it's a possibility. When it's in full release, they will check this. I'm not sure on early access. I think they're very okay with that. But if your game is standing and it's just for standing, then set that. If it doesn't make sense with room scale, or especially sitting is the one that's like, well, unless it really is a game for sitting down, don't put it in just for the sake of putting it in, because they will test it on full release. They will try it sitting down, and if it doesn't work, it'll come back. So if you want to do it for all of them, you have to make sure that you actually test it sitting down, and you actually test it standing, and you test it with room scale, and it all works, right? Because each one has its own limits and VRC checks to deal with, right? Like moving out of the boundaries, standing, sitting down is actually different height. How does that work with the game? And so that's my final tip. Everything, if you have anything that you're missing, let me know in the comments below. If you want to get more free information and you like these videos, please subscribe, because I'll make more for you guys. And if you have something that I haven't answered, or a question that you have that you just need help with, post below and I'll make a video on it. And if you need more help, personal help, we have a community, a school community that will help you finish your game faster if you're serious about game development. Hopefully you like this video. We'll talk to you later.